Formatting worksheets not only makes your data come alive and look a lot more interesting, it also makes your data a lot easier to read. For example, take a look at what I have on this worksheet. I have some data, but currently it's not really in the greatest format. It's going to be very hard for anyone looking at this to decipher it and understand it. So we could probably do with formatting this a little bit better so that it's easy to interpret. So let's take a look at some of the utilities that we have available in Excel which can help us with this. Now, looking at this data, the first thing I can see here that doesn't look too great is that the column headings where we have date, description and amount are kind of cut off halfway. And I can see here that that is because row 7 isn't wide enough to accommodate that information. And you'll see this again very frequently when you import data in from other systems. Sometimes these columns and these rows can end up kind of collapsed up like this so that you can't see the values in them. Now this is something that's very easy to fix. All we need to do here to increase this row height is hover our mouse over the dividing line between rows 7 and 8 and double click. And that is effectively going to invoke AutoFit in Excel, and it will adjust the height of that row to accommodate the height of the values contained within. It's also worth noting that aside from that double click, you can also access the AutoFit options from the ribbon. So let's just say I had a few rows which were kind of collapsed up like this. Let's just manually make this look even messier. What I could do here is I could select all of the rows, like so, up to the Home tab, across into the Cells group, and we have this Format drop-down. Now notice here at the top here we have two options that relate to the row height. I can specify an exact row height, or I can choose to auto-fit the row height. So if I click this option, it's going to basically do the same thing and auto-fit all of those rows. If I wanted to make each of these rows a very specific size, again, I could go to Format, Row Height, and I could enter in my own row height. So let's put 25 in there. When I click on OK, you can see it's going to widen out those rows. Now, I don't really want them that large, so let's undo to take us back to the regular row height. Now this works the same for columns, so you can see here that column B, currently that description is kind of cut off. I can double click to widen out that column, or if I wanted to be very specific about how wide I wanted each column, I could select all of the columns, go to Format, and this time I want to choose the column width. And maybe I want these to be 50 each, click on OK, and I get 3 equally sized columns. Let's undo those changes. So now that we've seen how we can kind of modify the row and column height and width, let's take a look at the actual data. Now in the first column here, I have some dates. I can see that those are showing as numbers, so they don't have the correct number formatting applied. Control-Shift down arrow to select everything, and then a quick way that I could do this would be to press Control-1 to jump me into my Format Cells dialog, and then I can go in and I can apply Date Format. I'm going to choose the top format there, click on OK, and that formatting has been applied. Now the description, that looks to be okay. I do want to apply some more formatting to these amounts. So Control-Shift down, Control-1, and now I can choose either currency or accounting format. And I think I'm going to use currency for these. I'm happy with 2 decimal places and a pound symbol, so let's simply click OK to apply that formatting. Now this isn't looking too bad, but I could make this look even better by applying more formatting. In its current state, it's readable, definitely, but there isn't much of a distinction between those column headings and the actual values, the information underneath, and it doesn't really look particularly interesting or engaging. So let's change that. I'm going to select the column headings, And then we're going to go up to the Home tab and into the Font Formatting group. And this is where you're going to find all of your options to change the look and feel of the font. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose a different font to use for these headings. And I want something a little bit bolder, so let's go with Arial Black. I'm going to increase the size of that font from 11 to 12. And don't forget, if you want to make minor adjustments to that font size, you have the increase font size button just here and the decrease font size button as well. Now I could choose to make this bold. I'm not going to do that because it's already bold. What about italics? Yep, that looks pretty good. I could add an underline. I think in this case that is a little bit of overkill. But what I do want to do is I want to make the background of this heading a different color. So for that, I can click the drop down and choose a color from the palette. Now the colors that you see in your palette underneath this theme colors heading are dictated by the theme that you're using in Excel. And we have a whole lesson dedicated to themes, so I'm not going to delve too much into this right now, but I'm using the standard Office theme, and these are the colors that come with the theme. Of course, if I don't like any of those, I can also choose from a small standard color palette, or I could go to more colors and really get very granular about the colors that I'm choosing. Now for this, I'm going to stick with my theme colors. I think I'm going to make this, let's make it a dark green color. And now I'm going to change the font color as well so that it stands out to white. So just with a few small formatting tweaks, we can really see the difference between those column titles and the rest of the data. Now something else I might want to do in here to make this look a little bit neater is maybe start adding some borders. So the first thing I would need to do here is select the cells that I want to put a border around, and then I can either jump up to the borders drop down and choose what type of border I would like. You don't necessarily have to have a border around every single cell. You can choose if you want it running across the bottom, across the top, so on and so forth. You can also choose the color of the border from here and also the border style. So whether you want a solid line, a double line, a dotted line, so on and so forth. Now, I always find when I'm working with borders, it's much easier just to jump into More Borders option, which is going to take us into Format Cells and that Border tab. From here, I can select what I want. So I'm going to say I want a solid line. In fact, let's make that a bit thinner. I want it to be the same color as the heading, so we're going to choose that forest green color. And from here, I can choose which borders I want to apply. And we have 3 presets at the top. So if I click Outline, you can see in the preview window, it's going to put a solid fill green border around the outside of where I'm selected. If I decide I don't like that, I can click the None preset and then maybe go in and choose some different options. So maybe I want a border across the top of the cell and across the bottom, but I don't want anything around each cell. Now, in my case, I do want a border around everything. So I'm going to choose the None preset just to get rid of all of those. And I'm going to say I want an outline border and also an inside border. Now, if I click on OK, you can see how that affects my data. To me, this makes my data not only a lot easier to read, but also a lot more interesting to look at.